Welcome to the Film Angle. I'm Alex, and we said we were pausing for a week, but an opportunity came up to speak to Annabelle Marshall, a documentary filmmaker who has a new short film debuting at the Raindance Film Festival this week in London. And we didn't want to pass that up. The film is called Fabric, and it sheds light on the story of a Paris fashion atelier which builds pathways for refugees in the world of French couture and society. This week is actually Refugee Week, and with the constant negativity and demonization of refugees from political figures and certain media, I thought it would be appropriate to share a positive story and shed some light on a really interesting and what I think is an important short film. So, without further ado, here's my interview with documentary filmmaker Annabelle Marshall. Hello, and thank you for joining the Film Angle, Annabelle. Lovely to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely, I'm glad. I'm glad. Before we jump into your short film Fabric, I thought it'd be good to get to know you a little bit better, and it'd be good to kind of understand your kind of background in film and how you came to kind of become a filmmaker and specifically documentary filmmaking, I guess.
Sure. Well, I've already always been a book nerd and a love of stories. And originally, as a teenager, I wanted to be a war correspondent. Case Sadie was my hero. Then I realised I actually didn't really fancy the lifestyle of a war correspondent, and I started watching Modern Times and Correspondent. You're probably too young to remember those. There's amazing BBC documentaries. And yeah, so I wanted to make documentaries since I was 16. I ended up sort of by accident studying Arabic at university and fell in love with the region. And then just after I graduated, I started at BBC Current Affairs, and that was almost 25 years ago now. And I've just worked my way up from researcher to assistant producer to director, and I've made a variety of what we call specialist factuals, so science, history, religion, current affairs. I made a few author documentaries about contentious subjects. So I made a film about assisted dying with Prue Leith, about social housing with the TV architect George Clark. And I've also recently made some true crime. So sometimes people look at my CV and they sort of say like, wow, you do quite a few different random things, but that's how I like it, because I think I'm a better filmmaker for making a variety of different things. I come with a fresh angle rather than just sort of painting by numbers and following, the formula.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I when I did some research on you, I saw the Prue Leaf documentary, and I did wonder because there's something about kind of identity there, although it is about assisted dying. She was doing it with her documentary with her son,
Hmm.
and I wondered if that was something. Obviously, this film Fabric deals with identity as well, and I wondered if that was kind of a through line throughout your work at all, something that kind of was a calling to you.
I do like talking about things that people don't necessarily find easy to talk about. So, death,
Mm.
or the importance of housing. I guess vulnerable people as well. But no, what really appealed to me about this project was the juxtaposition of two very different worlds. So, the reputation of the fashion industry, that it's for the wealthy and the elite. And then you've got refugees who arrive in Paris with absolutely nothing. So that's what it was that juxtaposition, the meeting of two worlds, that I found really interesting. And also, I think something I learned actually when I was working with George Clark about social housing: if you want the world to change, you've got to both shock and inspire people. There are plenty of
Yeah.
shocking documentaries about the refugee crisis or the countries where refugees come from. But I thought it was important to show what can be done with a bit of humanity, and that actually, if you flip the script, that and welcome refugees and nurture them and encourage them, then they can do amazing things. So it's a good news story, really. It's not necessarily representative of the welcome that all refugees get in Paris or France, but why not shine a light on a good news story?
Absolutely, I think the world needs more of it as well, and this might be a good time as well for you to maybe just kind of describe to the audience what Fabric is about,
Yeah, so Espero is an amazing organization in Paris that trains refugees in haute couture tailoring and then places them in top fashion houses. And every year they do a fashion show during haute couture week at the Musée d'Orsay, which is one of the most prestigious museums in Paris. And it's curated or guest designed by a fashion designer who's also an immigrant or a refugee. And so we follow them from the sort of the 3 or 4 months leading up to their fashion show, which was last year, and we meet the refugees, the sort of trainees, in the atelier whilst they're preparing the show, and yeah, meet a few of them and hear about their backgrounds and how they ended up coming to Paris.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I'd love to know how you kind of come about a story like that. Was that something that came to you, or was that something that you'd heard about and then wanted to kind of go and showcase it?
Yeah, it did. So the producer Sanam knew about the organisation, so she came to me with the idea, and I instantly, thought it was an incredible organisation. But to work out whether that doesn't necessarily mean it would make a good film, though. So I went over to Paris to meet Maya. It's led by, I should say, by an amazing American in Paris called Maya Persaud, who is a former model, and she knew about the fashion industry, but actually when she started doing set up the atelier, she was actually running programs, agricultural programs with
Mm.
refugees. And during the lockdown, a lot of the petit mains, which is what you call the kind of experienced tailors in haute couture tailoring, they're all quite old actually, and so they were very exposed to the COVID virus, and they couldn't come to work, and so there was a real skills shortage, and so someone approached Maya and said, "Do you know any refugees who are amazing tailors?" And actually, she discovered some. I mean, women in Afghanistan all do this most incredible embroidery, and and she actually found that a lot of these refugees in Paris weren't working in tailoring, but did have amazing tailoring skills. So, anyway, so I went when I was approached about the idea, I went to spend a day in Paris, and I actually just took a day bag with me with like a tiny little FX3 stills camera, well, that also shoots video, a couple of radio mics, and I spent the day in the atelier. But actually, a lot of that footage ended up in the final film. It's when one of the refugees opens up about, how terrible her country is, Eritrea. Why she had to leave, and got quite emotional, and where we met a few of the refugees for the first time. So yeah, and instantly I just thought, this is a fantastic project, and it will make a really interesting film.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear that you go out there solo and then kind of get this footage that makes it into the final film without knowing at that time, where that's going to go.
Mm.
Once you know that, yeah, okay, I'm going to make a documentary about this, and obviously it is a short film, so like I imagine it's on a slightly smaller scale. What kind of team do you bring with you? Because it is obviously quite an intimate documentary when you're talking about kind of the personal lives of these refugees and some of the hardships they've been through. How do you curate a team to go out and capture that?
Mm. Well, I self shoot most of my films, and I think that does really help having a small team.
Mm,
You've got a huge entourage. It's going to be much more difficult for people to open up in a genuine and authentic way, and especially when they're talking about really difficult times, it's not necessarily appropriate either to expect them to do that. I do speak French. I did French A level, but it's pretty rusty, and I certainly don't understand all the technicalities of tailoring. So it was important that we had a French speaker. So we had a French speaking DOP based in Paris, and both of us then ended up shooting it together. And quite often just the two of us. And then Sanan, the producer, came over for the Haute Couture Fashion Week. So, tiny team. But it was a small budget, and we didn't have a lot of time. So yeah, so that posed logistical challenges. But actually, I think some parameters can be quite useful for forcing creativity. So that they're not. It's not always a bad thing to have a strict timeline and a small budget. It can create wonderful things.
absolutely, and I guess you kind of it was kind of lucky in a way that you had the build up towards the show to kind of capture, and you had that essentially what I imagine would have been your endpoint when you're going in there and thinking this is how I imagine the structure of the film to be, and I think it's really smart the way the film starts with that, and you're almost in the general audience and going, oh, that's a lovely achievement, isn't this nice? And then to go back 4 months and actually dive deeper into the team, and into the lives of these people, and actually be like, wow, actually this is more than a good achievement. This is like something special and really unique and interesting. um
Yeah, well,
I guess. Sorry.
sorry, I was going to say. I mean, one of my main kind of worries was that it would end up being quite a sort of worthy kind of fundraising type charity film.
Mm,
And don't get me wrong, there's some very powerful and amazingly made films like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'd be film festival worthy. Or some people don't want to sit down and sort of and watch something like that necessarily. So yeah, setting it around the show just gave it a natural sense of drama. And yeah, sort of a sort of crescendo, if you like.
mm,
I mean, one of the something I still really want to do, and something we wanted to do at the outset, was make a longer film, sort of feature length film,
sure.
and follow the trainees from almost the moment they start in Espero. I mean, it's a 2-year program, so it would, or certainly throughout some of their training, and then to the moment they're actually placed in a fashion house, and then follow them through that journey of settling in. That wasn't something we could do at this stage, but there are many great films that started as short films, and I certainly think this has got the potential to make a longer film eventually.
Absolutely, absolutely. I could see it being almost like a Frederick Wiseman documentary of just kind of like lingering in that space and watching the team at work and kind of weaving in, the fascination of the craft along with those kind of natural stories. I could fully see that
Mm,
working as a large piece.
mm.
I guess in terms of like the structure, you have that general sense of where it's going to go when you go to film the film, but obviously this is documentary. Anything can happen. Was there anything that like that I don't know shocked or surprised you as you were filming it, that kind of wasn't an intention going in, but kind of was something that came out in the short film?
Um, No, I think there's it was such a sort of kind of I wouldn't say last minute, but it wasn't easy to necessarily plan who was going to be where or when at any given time. So that was sort of, we just had to kind of very much observational film a lot of the time. And I mean, sometimes things seem like you're just following observationally, but actually off usually when I'm filming observation, I'll know exactly what people will be doing at any given time. I know they'll be here and there, and that perhaps they'll be, cutting an apple up at some time, or you'll just sort of know in advance. But certainly filming the fashion show, it was, because it is a sort of charity, and there's not, it's not a kind of Prada show where everything's pre-planned to the second. So from a directing point of view, it was sort of slightly chaotic and less easy to plan. But no, other than that, I mean, it was amazing, the emotion at the end, and you genuinely, there was a lot of love in the room, which was great. And that
Yeah.
was great to capture. But no, nothing sort of crazily surprising.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I guess it's interesting to go into a film like this and it be realized in the way that you kind of imagined it going. Um, did you have any kind of setbacks at all, as somebody who doesn't know the fashion industry as well, but is quite like interested in kind of art in any kind of medium or form? Was there any kind of pushback from the fashion industry in terms of showcasing this
No,
story at all?
I think the fashion industry are keen to show, I suppose, a sort of greener, more sustainable, more ethical side. I think they have had quite a lot of bad press,
Mm,
recently, about that. So they were keen to show sort of, yeah, the fashion industry in a positive light. And I learned a lot. I didn't actually know that much about the fashion industry, and I certainly had quite stereotypical views of it. I thought, certainly in the type of people who worked in the fashion industry. And it was something, we have Catherine Brickhill, who was Alexander McQueen's first assistant, and who moved to Paris with him with Givenchy. And she's a mentor at Espero. And talking to her, and she said that actually, the fashion industry, fair enough, maybe it's expensive and it's sort of a high access point when you in terms of buying the clothes. But actually, there's a lot of working class and diverse people working in the fashion industry. Alexander McQueen himself was
mm.
working class, and So, and you need that, just like you need a diverse a sort of crew and cast or whatever in TV to make the best stories that represent us all. It's the same thing in the fashion industry. You need people from all over the world, from all different walks of life. Otherwise, the clothes become predictable and boring potentially. So actually, it made me realize that the fashion industry is more diverse than perhaps I realized at first glance.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think as well, that comment about Alexander McQueen coming from a working class background. Yeah, it kind of like we're continuing a legacy of building people up as the arts become almost more and more difficult to attain for people in kind of working class backgrounds. It's good as well to kind of showcase where there are places for people to go. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. In terms of kind of like your subjects, how do you kind of form a relationship with them in order for them to tell their stories? I realized at the start your very first the very first lady you speak to in the edit of the documentary kind of alludes to her story being quite uh, a scary one that she is like putting to one side for now, and then other characters throughout the film are talking about more openly about their kind of flights from their country and stuff like that. So like how do you get people to open up, and how do you know how far to push and kind of like that to get that story?
Well, I always like to sort of take it on their terms, and actually, that was one of the advantages of going with my camera on that very first day, because people may say that they're up for filming or don't mind it in theory, but until you stick a camera in their face, you don't know how willing they are to open up. And some were happy for us to film in their homes, and some weren't, whether they were comfortable to talk to us in the atelier. So they all had their own various degrees of what they were happy with. But yeah, I know I would never want to force someone to appear, and I want them
No.
to be proud of their appearance and their contribution in the film. So yeah, I mean, Suad is amazing, and she's so sort of stoic and such a beautiful person. Everyone loves her at the atelier. But yeah, wasn't comfortable with us filming in her home for whatever reason. So we mainly just filmed with her in the atelier.
Yeah.
But it was different with Ibrahim and Samaya.
Yeah, I think there's almost as much kind of power behind the words of hearing somebody's story and then also not knowing the full details and kind of having to put yourself in their shoes and be like, wow, what have they had to go through to get here, to get to this point.
I mean, one of my
Yes.
favorite films is Daughters. I don't know if you've seen that, the Netflix documentary about girls who, it's a special program for girls to visit their dads in prison and have a dance. Oh,
I
it's
don't think I have.
amazing. But what I love especially about that film is the intimacy between the sort of the director, the camera, and the contributors. You have children just sort of lying on their side, almost half asleep, and very close up and talking, in a very sort of personal way. But I've sort of heard the director speak, and who said they spent days with the contributors before even turning on the cameras. And we didn't have the luxury of that. But again, that's the advantage of having a feature documentary, that the more you spend time with people, the more they do feel comfortable with you and open up. But this was just a sort of short snapshot, sort of moment in time with the
Mm.
people and the atelier and their show.
Well, you have your premiere this week at the Raindance Film Festival. I'm interested to know, you capture this film, you edit it, you get it ready for distribution to different festivals. What's the plan when you have a short film put together like this? What were your goals for Fabric?
I suppose every filmmaker just wants to get their story out there, and we were really hoping after Raindance it will go on to other festivals around the world, and eventually make it onto the small screen somehow. But yeah, and then after that we will look at how we can maybe make a feature length version. Yeah, because it'd be great to actually film them in the fashion houses. There's 7 who have
Mm.
made it into top fashion houses, and even if it's not one of the top haute couture ones, they make it into other sort of. So it's just an interesting window into the world of the refugee situation in Paris generally, and the fashion industry in Paris generally. There's so many different ways you could go with it. So yeah, so eventually that's maybe somewhere we could go.
Absolutely. So the short film's almost like a stepping stone. Is that kind of is it almost like a fundraising to have the finances to then shoot a larger film, or is it just a proof of concept at this point?
I think a bit of both. I mean, we had a very, very small budget. When I tell people, I'm kind of shocked at
Yeah.
how much the budget was, and we pulled in a lot of favors. And but to be honest, that was actually one of the things I love most about making this film. Because largely, I am a sort of gun for hire. I make TV documentaries, and I have made one small independent film before, but I sort of went cap in hand to people to say, people I worked with over the years, to say, would you mind helping me with this documentary? And people were so willing to give up their own time to help. And it made me realize how much we love what we do. And
Mm.
so everyone, from the music to the post to, people were just willing to help. And I love that, because it's the joy of creativity and the joy of filmmaking. It's not always about the bottom line.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that is, yeah, right on the money there. And it's also Refugee Week this week. Was that a coincidence, or were
No,
you
that was
aiming
just a
for this
beautiful
kind of?
coincidence. So it's wonderful. Actually, we're delighted by that that has happened. So yeah, because it's just increasingly hostile. The world, the sort of drift to the right that is happening at the moment, and the media is just dominated by whether it's small boats crossing the channel or ICE agents in Minneapolis. And yeah, so it's nice to be able to sort of redress that balance a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is a really important film for a time when refugees are being demonized by political figures and the media. And I think, yeah, what are you hoping audiences take away from this when they go watch it at the Raindance Film Festival?
I'm hoping it humanizes refugees. I think, we're all sort of guilty of just not really seeing behind the headlines. We all lead busy lives. And, whether it's Gaza or Ukraine, we sort of we sometimes don't see the real people behind the headlines.
Mm.
And I think there are some sort of universal themes there, whether or not we've been a refugee ourselves or forced to move somewhere. We've all been through our own sort of trials and tribulations and challenges. And, it's about triumph over adversity. It's about hope. So it's about humanity. Yeah. So I hope that everyone will be able to take something from it, and that it's actually not just about refugees. It's about life in general. So yeah, and I hope that people will be a bit kinder next time they think of refugees or meet a refugee, wherever they're from.
I love your story of kind of going out there with a camera and kind of shooting it yourself. And somebody like myself, who, when I first went into film, as a child I had a hand camera and that was it. I was filming things with toys and friends and all this kind of stuff. What's your kind of advice to young filmmakers who might be in that same position now, who want to maybe get into more the documentary side, or film journalism, video journalism? What's your advice to them?
I would say just get out there and do that. Just do it. The sooner you start telling your own stories, the sooner you'll learn. So I mean, you can film things obviously on your iPhone now. You've got CapCut. You can easily. I mean, I've got a 13-year-old daughter who's amazing at editing, and I mean, I generally, because I'm sort of old, need to sit next to someone with a machine who presses all the buttons. I don't edit myself, but she's just sort of knocks these videos up very quickly. It is all possible. And so start shooting stuff, start editing it, and then you learn the art of storytelling. You also learn what shots you need, and you learn as much from your failures. Maybe you go out and shoot something and then you come back and realize you totally forgot to get this shot or that shot, or maybe you need more general shots that you probably realize to cover cuts. It's you just learn so much from doing, and even if you never show it to anyone, it's still, and maybe you'll need a show reel or something further down the line that'll be useful for that. I mean, the industry is in a very difficult place right now. I think
Mm.
no one's going to argue with that. And so it's tricky when people ask me what my advice is for young people, but we will always need storytellers, and that's never going to change. And it almost doesn't really matter what platform it's on. Maybe we won't have as many cinema docs, maybe we won't have as many TV docs, but we'll always have films. And the platform, I think, is relevant. So, yeah. So I would just say, just go out and do it and follow your passion. I think someone once said to me, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I definitely feel that about my career. I've spent my whole life doing something I just love, So if that's your dream, just go and do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when maybe more specifically tailored towards like documentary filmmaking, how do you know when the story is the one? How do you know when to start filming?
Oh, that's really difficult. I mean, I think anything that's got multiple layers, will always be interesting. So, um, it's like this. It's not just about refugees. It's about the fashion industry. It's about lots of other different things. So I think that's the key. When you can see there's lots of different ways you can go, or that there's yeah, maybe I like films that cross genres as well. Maybe there's a
Mm,
little bit of history in there. Maybe there's a little bit of science. Maybe there's something present day. Maybe it tells us about the future. I think that's what's. I always sort of try and look sort of beyond the surface as to what something a film's really about. So the assisted dying film wasn't just about whether we should legalize assisted dying. It's actually what makes life worth living, and it's different for everyone. Is it loss of dignity? Is it pain? Is it then the joy? Is it there's so yeah. But I think that what I found is even when I was an assistant producer, I made a film about geology, and I did it because I needed a job and I got to travel to amazing places. But I thought, geology, that's going to be quite dull. But as soon as I start researching geology, actually, it's the most fascinating thing ever. If you start researching any story,
mm.
I think you can make it interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. On the podcast, we had a previous series where we worked through the blind spots on the Sight and Sound Greatest Films of All Time list, which was a list of films by filmmakers and critics, and you get to see how the classics have influenced kind of like modern day films, and where those influences have taken our filmmakers. I wondered, what are some of your favorite films or films that have kind of influenced your style of filmmaking? And kind of any films that you wish to make in the future. Have you got any kind of like big influences there?
Well, as I mentioned, I really love Daughters recently. But from a sort of feature doc perspective, I really loved Fahrenheit 9/11, and it's something a film I often think about. The Michael Moore one.
Mm,
I love the way it brilliantly zigzags, takes you down this path. You think, oh, the gun issue is going to be because there's so many guns in America. Oh no, no, but then you discover Canada has actually got more guns, and then it's sort of it really you think there's come to a resolution, and then he brings up another point, and that's something I try to do with my sister dying film. Actually, is kind of
mm.
zigzag between and take the audience on this journey. So I thought the storytelling specifically on that was amazing. There was a great documentary years ago. I can't remember if it was BBC, but anyway, it was a 2-hour film called Chosen about 3 men who'd been abused as children at boarding school. And they most of the time, it was one of the first few TV documentaries to use the eye direct, actually, so staring straight down the lens. And they had about like 3 or 4 photos of them at school as children. And other than that, it was just them talking. But it was very powerful interviews, and it was a real reminder that actually story and storytelling is often far more important than visuals. You don't have to slap loads of shots all over it. It doesn't have to be, super exciting music here, there, never to hold people's attention. They were just 3 amazing storytellers, a very powerful story, speaking direct to camera. And I always hold that in my mind, that as long as the story is good, sometimes just that's enough.
There's always the best way to film a story is sometimes just to let the story play out by itself. You don't need fancy recreations and stuff like that. You can respect the story itself. Yeah, that's really
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up, for generations, we've been sitting around the fire storytelling, and, or is audio storytelling is oral storytelling, I should
Yeah.
say, sometimes enough,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Annabelle. I really do appreciate your time with this, and I really, really enjoyed the documentary. And yeah, I hope audiences enjoy it as much on Friday and Saturday, I believe, at the festival. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for
that's
joining
right.
me.
Well, brilliant to talk to you, Alex. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again to Annabelle for her time. I really enjoyed the short film and I wish it all the success as it finds its audiences this week in London. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review it on the relevant platforms. And if you want to keep up to date with us, you can find us at The Film Angle on Instagram and TikTok. So, see you next week. Goodbye.